Hey face makers, welcome back to the factory. So today we're going to do a follow-up on what I was talking about in an earlier video regarding the teeth for the Eddie makeup from Iron Maiden. This is going to be kind of a comprehensive video. It's going to be two separate molds I'll be making. One is a two-part brush-up mold on the lower section of teeth, and the upper is going to be what's called a case mold. It'll be on the upper teeth. The first video you'll be watching will be done on the lower section of the teeth. And because of the way I had to make the mold, I had to actually build a scaffold with some foam core. Take your notes. This may be quite a long video, but there's a lot of information here I think it's going to be great for everyone to follow along, so you at least have a full understanding of the different types of molds that you can make using silicone with a mother mold made of ultracal. So dive in and learn some cool stuff. We'll see you later. Okay, as you see, I've used foam core to add supports to the sculpture, which has been hot glued to a plexiglass plate and tilted to the proper angle. Using an X-Acto knife, I cut my foam core and secured it into place with hot glue. Now this allows me good support and no movement, so I get a good clay up on both halves of the mold, so I can do each half separately. The curvature there allows me to just lay a strip of clay along the edge, creating a perfect seam down the middle. As you see, the clay is held in place by the foam core scaffolding. I've added some keys using half dome plastic acrylic and sprayed it with crystal clear. Okay, I'm going to do a brush up of this little mold here. I'm using Flat Gel 25 with a little bit of pigment in it. What you try to do is, because you're working against gravity as well, you got to get up underneath things with your little brush. Get all the detail first. See how I'm starting at the top, I'm letting it drip down so kind of gravity helps me out. Main thing is to get the part of your model first. Then you get all of the other surrounding areas. And the reason that I am using a kind of a translucent color is that way I can see air bubbles in it. If it's a very opaque color, I can't see all the air bubbles. Although I'm going to be blowing it with an airbrush to get some of them out, sometimes they get by you. Now, the reason I'm making this mold in two parts is because it has deep undercuts up underneath it. And what that creates is a mold that you can't access it when it's closed to brush in some of the dental acrylic into the mold. So I want to make the mold in two parts. That way I can do the upper section of the mold, the part here with the teeth, and then I can do the underneath section, which is just tucks under the chin. But I want to be able to brush those up separately and then put the molds together as I go. Now the reason that I've tilted the whole mold anyway is to get it at an angle so I can get at everything, do my walls and everything. So it's, you'll see kind of as you gain experience making molds, you'll see that building a scaffold like I did with the foam core here actually helps you a lot in building a clay wall. So don't know how long this stuff is going to take to set, but I'm just going to work it anyway. Get it all up underneath there. And let it do its thing. Then I'll follow along with a couple of extra coats, probably with a thickener in it, so it'll help me get it into place and make it stay there. Because when it's drippy like this, it's kind of hard to keep it up underneath things, like up under this lip right here. It's a little tricky. You just have to pay attention to such things. You'll kind of feel the silicone thickening up as you're working with it, so that'll give you a little indication how close it is to setting. And at one point you have to step away and not touch it, because you don't want to disturb a thin layer of silicone with brushing on a thick layer. Yeah, I can feel it starting to kick a little bit already. See how it's gooing right there? So when it starts to go thick, you just move it in and shape it. You can't brush it at one point. Try to get it as much use as you can out of what time you have left. So what I'm doing is brushing it up underneath and behind the teeth. So when this stuff freezes in place, then I can back it up with a thicker layer. See, I didn't even have time to use an airbrush on this. All right, we'll come back for the next coat. Okay, I'm now doing my second batch, and this is a Thixotropic. I added some thickener to it, so it'll help it stay in place better. We'll see how it works. And I put a little bit darker blue in it, just so we can see where it is compared to the color below it. Not much difference, but I cleaned my brush out with naphtha, so I saved my same brush. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start putting this into place. See, it has a little more staying power. I've also tilted it in a bucket to change the angle so I can get up underneath areas where I couldn't get before. Yeah, now I can just brush up underneath there. Get up underneath that lip. A little more coverage. So I'll probably do one more batch to get all up in this area. There we go. You just build on the layers as you go. There's other ways to do it, but this is actually the simplest form. There we go. You don't waste as much when you do a smaller batch like this. The first batch was 140 grams. This is about 88 grams. There we go. So I'll just give this a spin. Take what I've got here and brush it up underneath here a little bit too. Just to utilize what I've got while it's thick. And the next coat I can probably put in place with a spatula. Probably won't even need a brush, because I'll probably mix a little Cabosil with my next coat. And the Cabosil will make it a little more stiff. But this will, just building up in layers like this keeps from damaging that first layer I put down. I'm just very careful. See how the teeth are very thin right there? I've got a little bit left in my cup. I'm going to save it, so as it gets really thick, I'll glop it on that teeth area, and that will give me a coating that I want. I'm going to use this little airbrush to get out some bubbles. That first layer, because I used my my vacuum chamber, I got out all the bubbles as much as I could. And if you can keep the surface layer free of bubbles, I didn't use this in the vacuum chamber because I knew I needed to get it on quickly. And you can't vacuum it when you put a Thixotropic inside of it. It just doesn't work. So the subsequent coats, I'm not putting in the vacuum chamber. I'm just getting it on there. I see a big gob right there. I want to get this over the teeth. Get that detail. There we go. There we go. Once you kind of get it in shape, or get it in there, you just have to walk away from it and just let it be. I can kind of see where the thin areas are. I'm going to kind of very carefully drag the silicone over. So you notice I'm just kind of moving it around very carefully. I've got some thin spots here and there. The next batch I'll do some Cabosil in it, and the Cabosil will give me a little bit different type of thickness. See, this is a very thin gel. The Cabosil will be more like a paste, and I'll be able to butter it into place. I'll fill all this so it'll have an even thickness, the depth of this clay wall that I put up there. So that's good. I've got all my detail. I can move some of this, but you got to be careful. You don't want to disturb that lower layer. Great. Okay. There we go. Okay, final coat. This is the Cabosil coat. As you see, it's very thick. It went on really nice. And that gave me the coating that I wanted to stiffen it all up and bring it all together. Now, when this sets, I'll just go over it with some Ultracal to back it up, and I'll flip it over, clean off the clay, prep the other side, and run that too in the same way. Now, as this sets up, I can take a little alcohol on my fingers and smooth that down. Great. Now, see a little alcohol on there before it sets. Helps you smooth that around. You just don't want it to lift itself up and lap over on itself, because once you've got alcohol on there, it's not going to want to stick to itself. But just kind of smooth it down, so when you put your backing on it, it fits on nice and smooth. You don't want too many grooves in there. You want it to be able to fall into its plaster backing real nice once it's all taken apart and has to go back together. There we go. So that's that. That was 3 layers. All types of silicone require a little getting used to as far as the way they work together. I haven't worked with this much. This is Platgel 25. It's a different working type of silicone that I've worked with before like this. So take note. If you haven't worked with a silicone, probably better to do a little test first, time how long it takes to set, and what stages it goes through before it finally sets. Because there is what I call a freeze factor, where you can work silicone to a certain point, but then at one point you can't touch it because it freezes in place, and if you disturb it, it can mess up things underneath. But this worked out quite well. Next, I'll be putting a Ultracal backing on it. And the reason I'm using Ultracal is I want it nice and hard. I'm not going to use dental stone. That's a more expensive material. I'm not going to use Hydrocal because that is cheaper material, but If I drop it, it can break a lot easier. And I just want a good sturdy little mold. There we go. Okay, I've trimmed down the edges a little bit. I took away my little wall. I cut it down to about 1/4 of an inch. So I'll put my ultracal over it and it'll overlap the edge here and lock onto it a little bit. It won't quite touch the next side, which is okay because the silicone can compress a little bit and make the mold even tighter. You'll understand that later. But right now I'm just going to put a little a little coat on. As soon as it touches right here where the clay is, it's going to do what I call, it's going to freeze. So that's kind of where I'm going to dab it first. And then I'll put some burlap on it just to make it a little strong. This is not a really heavy duty mold. It's a very, small mold. So it's not a big deal. I don't have to like make it super sturdy, super strong. It just has to be a nice, clean, functional mold that closes tight and holds my silicone together. So it's like one layer is all I'll need to do. That way it'll be a nice clean little mold. And I'm just taking my time with this. The most critical part of this was the clay up and the laying of the first side of silicone. When this is all done, it'll be set. I'll just come out tomorrow morning. This is at night right now. And it'll have a chance to set really nice, and then I can come out tomorrow, open it up, do the other side, and move on to the upper set of teeth. So that's basically how I put that on there. And I keep a bucket of water off to the side so I can put this in the water so it doesn't dry out on me. But in the meantime, I'll just dip some of these little pieces in here, and just enough to get them wet. There we go. Just want to kind of get them on there. And I'll press in the ultracal to completely lock it into the burlap. There we go. Okay, so that's that one. Now I'm going to go around the edges. Here's a cool little trick I like to do. Maybe you can see it. I'm going to move this over. Wherever I've got a small bowl, I'll dip one inside in it like that. Then I'll just grab a hold of it. So one side is wet. Now I just hold my hand and I just tap it as I pull it. Then I drag it across the top. And see, now I got a nice coating. So I'm just going to go around the edges like that. Press in that ultracal right into the edge of that. That's where I can use my brush again. Press it right into the edge of that. This is really only in case I drop this half of the mold or something. This is a good way to use your selvage edge of the burlap. So again, I dip it, and as I pull it, I rake it off on the side. If you dip it again, make sure I get enough on there. I can always rake it off again. There we go, see? Now over here, I'll just tuck it in, go around the edge, fold it over. For anyone who's ever done any fiberglass work, it's very similar to doing fiberglass work, except you can do it with your fingers, which is nice. I'm not a fiberglass fan. I don't like the smell. I don't like the chemical part of it. But it's just kind of one of those things you have to do once in a while. This is one other piece of that I'm going to put across the top there. There we go. Then I just press in, make sure there's no air bubbles under the surface. That's really all I have to do as far as the, there we go. What I'm trying to do too is I want a 90-degree angle. I don't want this to slope like this. I want it to go straight up. So I'm going to build up my edge to be kind of squared off. And as that's a great thing about UltraCal. You have plenty of working time with it, so you can shape it and work it. It goes through what's called a really nice plastic stage for shaping. So again, here's my little favorite technique. I'm using my plastic spatula to get it all into place. And as it gets thicker and starts to set, I'll switch over and use a stainless steel spatula. There we go. Some people make theirs big and smooth. I like a ridge around it. It just it makes a lighter mold. It's just as strong. If I was to do this whole mold like this, it'd be fine. But this, the way I have ridges on it, when I put a mold clamp on this, it's going to have a better place for the mold clamp to lock in instead of sliding off. If this was all smooth, the mold clamp could slide off. And I'm going to use a strap clamp or even a rubber band, but it could slide off. But when you have a groove right here, you can put it straight across and it'll hold on really nice and won't slip off of the mold. A little trick I learned from those great mold makers that I worked with over the years. There we go. Now I just kind of let it start to set. And as this starts getting more on the thicker side, I can start shaping it, and then eventually I can just walk away from it and let it sit. If any of you have a hard time finding a burlap fiber like this, I get mine at Hobby Lobby. I used to buy it in bulk, but since I don't make that many molds anymore, Hobby Lobby has this. It's about 1/4 of an inch holes in it. So it's a perfect size, and it comes in rolls, and a lot of times it's on sale. So Hobby Lobby, they're everywhere, I think. If you use regular burlap, the holes aren't big enough in regular burlap. You want that open cell. Okay, dokie. So we're going to stop here for a second. I'm going to clean up, but we'll come back and you can see me do all the finished work. Also, when you're making a mold like this, around the edges you can see the clay. I'm cleaning this right down to the clay so it's not dripping down. It's easier cleanup. So if you work as you go, there's very little cleanup. This little guy's good too, because I can get in here and shape that gooey stuff. Okay, I'm going to cut this off and I'll come back in a minute. This is still a little soft. I want you to see it as it gets to the thick stage so you can see how I work it. So we'll come back in a minute. Through the magic of time lapse or stopping and starting the camera, we'll see what's going on. Okay, this is the perfect thickness, the perfect consistency. Oops. Well, anyway, now you can really shape it and get it on there. Get that nice edge that I like on there. If you're not a good mold maker, practice. It's a fun thing to do. I like these kind of molds because they're small, but it's like doing a little piece of art. I enjoy the figuring out where your seam line goes and all that. Some people don't like making molds. I like them to an extent that they don't take too long to make, but I enjoy the engineering that goes along with it. Doesn't seem like it is something that would require a lot of thought, but I guarantee you, if you learn to make good molds, it's a skill that you can get a job with. I mean, I've gone in on many times just to make molds for people, or just made it part of what I did. I kind of like that. To me, as a makeup artist, there's so many facets of that business, and I'm not saying that any is better than the other, depending on the person. I mean, I enjoy a creative process that takes me all the way through from beginning to end. I don't mind putting on other people's prosthetics, but I enjoy putting on the prosthetics that I make. And I put on other people's prosthetics a lot. And the great thing about that too is you see how different people make their prosthetics. So it gives you even a more rounded understanding of the proper way to make them or make them better. So you can include that the next time you make prosthetics. So that's a great way to learn about prosthetics, is actually put someone else's designs on and see how they designed it and stuff. So I mean, it's a great way to learn, and I've done a lot of other people's prosthetics, which makes my stuff even that much better. I have a certain way that I work. I don't have a big shop. I've never had a big studio for any length of time. I've had like 3 studios. One kind of fell apart before it ever got built because the movie got canceled. But I was the kind of guy who I love being on set, and I love making this stuff. So when the opportunity came, I got out of my last studio, and we were just adding on to my house, and I decided to build a little small studio at home, and that's what I did. And it's not big, but the size of a 2-car garage, and for me, that's all I needed, because I was on set so much that I didn't need a big studio, and there's no overhead. It's part of the house. It's an extra bathroom. I've used it for barbecues and get-togethers when I wasn't working in it. So it's nice to have a little studio at home, and I enjoy that. Anyway, that's about done. See how nice that turned out? Nice shape. As it dries, I'll buff it down and get all the shine off of it, and maybe take a few little marks out. But basically, that's it. And very little waste, just a little bit. So that's another great feeling, is finishing a mold and you had just enough material to do it. This is even not as good as some. I love it when you're scraping the bowl and that's all you needed. To me, that's a personal challenge, to mix just enough of the material to make the mold. And that's the great thing about working. I had the great honor and opportunity to work with some really good mold makers throughout the years. And these are guys who started off doing a lot of molding for architectural molding, but then they started having a need for mold makers in the makeup community for special makeup effects. So what happened is they got these really talented craftsmen who came into the mold making field and started making these prosthetic molds. And if you're lucky enough to work in a studio or a shop where these guys were working, and you spend any time with them and watch how they work, you pick up a lot of great techniques. And I was really fortunate to work with some great mold makers along the way. Gunnar Ferdinandsen, Richard Ruiz, Mike and Ralph Kobos, those are the guys I worked with. But along the way, there's new guys show up. Right now, there's a lot of really good mold makers out there because of these big studios. And I'm not even assuming, I know they do, because I've talked to a few of them. They've given me some tips on stuff. So anyway, learn some mold making. It's a great skill to learn. It's an outside of the makeup stuff. It's just one that's it's fun to do. Alrighty, we'll call that quits. See you next time for the other half.